How's it going, everybody? On this episode of the AVB Podcast, we are back here at Freshly Squeezed Studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, and I get to sit down with the lovely and talented Mr. Dan O'Shea. What's going on, dude?
Hi, man. Lovely. I like that.
Dude, Danno, I was introduced to Danno originally through, seeing you guys play, I think, initially at the Dominion House with My Son the Hurricane, and then Six, who's doing our cinematography for a while, had reached out, and when Pindles had come on, we had talked to you about it or something, and managed to get My Son the Hurricane on the show, and I was super excited about that.
Yeah, I've known Six for years. I actually met him in Vancouver. And actually, I feel like we met at Fork and Cork Festival.
Oh, yeah. That's where I think I first saw you, yeah. The first time I saw, so for those of you who do not know, Dan is the drummer and agent, basically, for My Son the Hurricane, handles all of that stuff, and is basically the brains behind the operation.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I guess you guys got like 300 members.
It feels that way. It's a revolving cast. No doubt.
We'll definitely get into. I want to get into the history of My Son the Hurricane for sure. But let's start with you the same way we start with everybody else on the show. Tell me about the house you grew up in. I want to know about mom and dad, brothers and sisters, that kind of thing.
I come from a house of Irish parents. And I have...
Tough to tell with the O'Shea.
Yes, yeah, totally. And I have 3 sisters, 1 older, 2 younger. Mm-hmm. And we, just the classic middle-class upbringing. And music didn't come into my life until I was probably 15 or 16, which is really strange because most musicians start very young. And my interests were elsewhere as a kid.
What were they?
I was into, baseball and boxing. And
you were a sports guy?
I was a sports guy, which is funny in retrospect. But that's how I grew up. I really had a different appreciation. Music just wasn't on my radar, and it wasn't until I think I was probably like 1994 or something like that. My oldest sister had bought me a Walkman for Christmas. I'm showing my age now.
Right.
And I remember, she had a tape, an Our Lady Peace tape, and which is funny because now, I do some work with Coalition, who was basically built by Our Lady Peace.
Right.
That was their big band that broke Coalition Entertainment, and. It's interesting how it all melds together.
So, but talk to me about that. So, like, growing up as a kid, there was was music just sort of was it just a thing that existed?
It was. We the music in our house was Irish folk music, and there really wasn't any talk of like rock and roll music until actually, this is funny, when Wayne's World came out. It became apparent that my dad was a big Queen fan, and I remember he bought me a Queen record. And that was like my introduction to rock and roll, really. It was Queen, and then that was the same year that huge Bryan Adams record was out. And my older sister, bless her heart, she had to take me to see Bryan Adams, and she was probably, 16 at the time. I think I was 10.
Right.
And so in that same year, I saw Bryan Adams and I saw Bare Naked Ladies on that Gordon tour.
Okay.
So those were like breaking albums.
Yeah.
I had no idea that I was seeing these bands that, what could be considered some of their pinnacles.
Right.
And so I remember my dad giving me this Queen album saying, I think you're really gonna like this. And it's funny because
was he right?
He was totally right, and I have a soft spot for a huge spot in my heart for Queen.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I still haven't seen the movie.
I was just going to ask you
because I'm concerned. I understand that Hollywood's got a job to do.
Right.
And but I got into it, and so besides the Irish folk music and Queen, that was basically the bridge.
Talk to me about the Irish folk music thing. Was our mom and dad like direct from Ireland?
Yeah.
Irish?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So when you grew up in an Irish house, you grew up in an Irish house.
Yeah. So it's an Irish family, but it's I grew up with the classics, and what I think a lot of people would think of as Irish music, but I also know the really traditional stuff, like stuff sung in Irish.
In the Gaelic stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I've done, I don't know, I keep falling ass backwards into it, but for a few years I was always playing on the Irish circuit because I just knew it all. I knew.
Was it always just drumming?
Yeah, I was always drumming.
Okay.
you know,
do you play anything else?
Yeah, I play play guitar, and I think, you know, every Irish kid plays the violin a little bit,
right?
But not very well. But yeah, it was always drumming, and again, like, you know, it was all just like static noise to me at that time. Like, it was just like, yeah, I like music. You know, I liked what I heard in the house, but it wasn't until I was...
So even though music wasn't a thing for you, you were active in music. Did I misread what you were saying? Like, you were doing the drum, you were playing drums and you were...
Well, not until I was 16.
Oh, okay, so that did come a little bit after.
I liked music, but there was a time when my parents split up that I lived in this psychiatrist's basement with my dad. We lived in this tiny place about the size of this room we're in.
Right.
And it was like basically 2 beds and a bathroom. And, you know, I had been hounding my dad for years to get a drum set. And I actually slept beside the refrigerator. And, you know, so if you want to talk about humble beginnings, and I remember he would come home from a long day at work, and that would coincide with the same time that the psychiatrist would stop working.
Right.
So I was allowed to play.
Okay.
And so I would throw on, I think I was playing along to like Marilyn Manson records or Primus records, you know.
Wait a second. You lived with your dad in a single room,
yep,
in a basement of somebody else's house.
Yeah.
And Dad went, fuck it, we're getting you a drum kit?
You know, I think he just realized that I was at this point where it was, you know, I think every parent, you know, I can say this because I'm a parent, you know, whenever your kid brings an interest to you, you're trying to suss out the level of interest.
Right.
Is this part of their core being? Is this something they just heard about?
Right.
And I had been talking about drums for like a couple of years, and I remember him and I driving once and him saying, like, would you play with anyone? I said, I don't know. Right. I don't know if I'd be any good at it. I don't know anything about drums.
So there was a conversation about this.
There was many conversations about it, you know.
No, but I mean, like, outside of you going, like, oh, Dad, I want to play drums, man.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably how it started.
Right.
And I think he was just like, what do you know, especially because there had been no, you know, again, we didn't grow up in a family where anyone in my family played music. You know, my parents didn't, my sisters
It's not
didn't.
even really a thing, right?
No, yeah, they were just like, what do you mean? Like, where's this coming from? And they're like, well, we'll see, of course, you know. And then it just, like, I think I was just, you know, I had like pencils, I was hitting everything, and then I think
were you a pots and, you know, this was later, but I was like, were you a pots and pans kid?
Yeah, basically, I was, you know, and I remember trying to figure out, I could hear these sounds, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and it was like the hi-hat. And I was like, I hear this thing, and, you know, and so my dad, for one Christmas, surprised me. I think I was 16 with the drum set. And then me and this drum set, this old shitty beater kit, became inseparable. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny.
It means so much more then, though,
well,
right?
Yeah, and you just don't know when you're going to introduce a kid to something that would change their lives. Like, he definitely wouldn't have thought that, well, this guy is now going to go to music school and, you know, tour the world and then start his own business and, like, pay his mortgage with music and the music business. I think, you know, you can't know that sort of thing.
It's funny because, like, I think when you, like, there's different paths to everything, and I understand that, but, like, when you talk to anybody who's super proficient in just about anything, but let's talk about music for example. If I give you at 15 years old, like, the top of the line, you know, brand new Pearl Ludwig kit, whatever, that's one thing, and yeah, you like it and you're going to play, but having that little shitty kit, you have to work so hard to make it sound the way you want it to sound that it just has way more value and meaning to you, I think.
I think that at the time, too, I didn't care.
Right.
I remember my first cymbal, actually somebody had written Sabian on it. Like, it was definitely like just an old piece of bronze, and I just didn't care. And to me, it might as well have been that top of the line kit because I was so. It wasn't until I started like jamming with people that I started to realize that maybe this isn't like the Cadillac I think it is. But I just didn't care, and I started touring very young. Really, I actually left high school to go on a tour.
Get out!
Yeah, and
tell me about your first band, because like it's interesting that you got this drum kit. You know, this drum kit that's sitting in a one-room, you know,
basement apartment.
So how long? Because so Dad says, "Are you going to play anything?" I'm starting to get more perspective on this. When Dad asked you that, he wasn't asking, "Are you going to make this a career?" He was asking you, "Are you going to get this fucking kit out of my basement?"
Well, more or less. And you know, I was playing, and then I started jamming with someone else.
Yeah, tell me about the first band.
The first band was probably just doing. I think we were just playing, grunge covers in my friend's basement, and I had as high school was starting to wind down, I started taking drum lessons, a few years later, and it became clear that I really, really cared.
Okay.
I really, really, really cared about music. And as high school was winding down, I got this opportunity through my drum teacher at the time to go kind of tour with another band through the States. So I had toured with this blues band out of Texas, and it was great. It was.
How did these connections come up?
So basically, my drum teacher at the time was their original drummer.
Okay.
They had contacted him about a large tour. He was no longer in the position. He had some kids. He was settling down.
Right.
He was, he wasn't the kind of guy who had 11 months in tour on the brain. For me, I was working at the local record or music store. I was making, $6.40 an hour.
Right.
And they were telling me, they said, well, we can pay you like $400 a week, which is like kind of like, minimum wage to some musicians on the road. To me, that was like,
huge.
Oh, I just won the lotto, you mean?
Right.
And I was so young that I was still like 4 years away from being able to go into these clubs.
Right.
So I kind of grew up, sleeping in the van and sleeping in band room floors and, with like older guys and playing all these other tunes. So it was really kind of an odd thing. And then I came home and I wanted to finish high school. And so I came back to high school.
How long was the tour?
The tour was 11 months.
11 months. So you were gone for a year.
I was gone for basically a year, and I came home as actually the most depressing homecoming of all time because it was right around Christmas, I remember, and I had like 4 answering machine messages and like, a stack of bills and shit. But I didn't care because to me it was just it was incredible. And I came back and I had to enroll in my last semester of high school. And it was strange because all my friends had graduated and moved away. Yeah. And so now there's all these younger kids, like my friends' siblings, and I'm with them and I had also, it was really hard to go from, I can tell you now that even a 10-day tour, when you're out, we call it in Hurricane, we call it PTD, post-tour depression. Right. Because reality is tricky to adjust back to right away. Right. Especially like now that things are going very well. Mm-hmm. So back then though, I was playing to like small, dingy rooms, and I thought I was Bono. Yeah. So I came back, and it was I was not in fact Bono, and I was Danno, and it was much more depressing, and nobody cared, and I had to work again. Right. And that sucked. And then
that's the worst part, right? Because when you're out doing the tour, you're thinking, we were just talking about this morning. It's like, fuck, I want to do this every day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what it kind of gets into. I see people who have been touring much like me for like 20 years, and there's just a certain thing that gets in the blood. Yeah. And once it's in there, you're a dog with a bone. It's hard to get off the road because you understand what it can be like. When it's good, it's great. Yeah. When it's not, it is bad.
You know what? That's really interesting. Would you be willing to walk down a couple of those roads? Give me, for posterity's sake, give me one of the good ones. Give me some of the fun, like, and I mean, you can take it any direction you want, but give me some of the good road stories.
Some of the good.
Give me one of them. When you think back of like this is the stuff that we did on the road, what's the one that you're like, oh no, this one night?
The good. Jeez, it's so easy to always remember the bad. Right. I think that. Oh, let's see. There was definitely. I remember.
By the way, for you folks watching at home, what you're seeing there is him cycling through all the stories he can't tell.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just cleaning up in my mind what could be the best ones. I think when you first start meeting your heroes, it's really obscure. And this last year, we had been, we got a chance to play Riverfest with the Flaming Lips, and we got a chance to. I remember we were playing Wapiti Festival in Fernie, British Columbia, and it's got to be to about 10,000 people, I'd say. And Winter Sleep was was playing before us.
Right.
And to a couple of the guys in the band, like that was like a real feather in their cap. Like it was just really amazing, you know, and we notice this now that we're backstage and, you know, you recognize all these people because you've been seeing them for years, and you know, you're out partying with them. And I think that as a whole has been really amazing for us, and to be, you know, and to know that what I remember going to see a band at Lee's Palace, and there was like 37 people there, and I thought it was amazing. And you know, in our last show there was with Five Alarm Funk. Our last show there was sold out, and yeah, it's 600 or 700 strong. And I think I was saying to the guys, I remember before we went on, just saying, you know, this is an unlikely success. And not that we don't work hard, not that the band's not good. It's just that what we do is really different.
What you guys do is crazy. Like
it's very different. Yeah. And to, you know, and I think that for the younger guys, I always try to say, like, really take this in, because
it's not going to happen
This
again.
is not the kind of thing that is standard.
And what's really weird is that, and you just mentioned it, there's like a couple of you guys that are doing, like Five Alarm Funk is another one, like not the same type of music, not the same type of band, but like these big multi-instrument sort of like, and that's really what, like, that music got away from that for a long time because it's too fucking expensive.
You know, there's a reason we called one of our first records "You Can't Do This."
Right.
You know, because everyone was like, this is a great idea. It just won't work. And I just kept thinking that, you know, it can work. It just needs to be worked. And I realized early when we went to the agency group and when we went to these, you know, bigger booking agencies, they were just like, I really like this band, but I don't know what to do with it, or there'll be no money left over for me, or things like that. And so I realized that, you know, I'm going to have to get this skill set. And so that's what...
Isn't that the way it always is, though? Like, you have to recognize, well, nobody else is going to do it, and there's nobody else around willing to do it, then I'm going to have to do it me?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mind that at all. And it was tough to learn that skill set because I just been playing drums for forever.
Well, there's a piece of your story that I'm still sort of like a little confused about, and it's the ambition of it, because like you got that drum kit, you know, in the basement or whatever. Yep. And you're a young kid with no real musical background, then all of a sudden you're on fucking tour.
Yeah, so I'll fill in a gap. That somewhere around the time that I really started bugging my dad for drums, music started to become more in my life. I started to meet friends in high school who were, you know, throwing me Primus CDs and throwing me, you know, Manson CDs and Pantera records. And all of a sudden, you know, it's like I'm getting into that part of my life where music is becoming a thing. So I start to play the drums and I become immersed in music. Like, just immersed. And then I went to jazz school. I went to Humber College in Toronto. Okay. And so that's what got me down south. After my big tour, I went to college. And after Humber, I was burnt out. Right. I always joke with people that if you see the movie Whiplash, it was like actually, you know, sadly endemic of what my life had been like at Humber. And I was like burnt out for a year or two. And I just, you know, I kind of like I wanted to try to get away from music. But, you know, just like in The Godfather.
As soon as I was out, they pulled me back in.
And you can't. It's like, it's impossible. And then I remember there was this band. I remember going to see a band one night at a bar. Someone said, you got to go see this band. And I've been like out of music for 2 years. I just needed a break. And then I saw this group, the Marantz Project, and I loved them. And so I joined.
Where are they from?
They were from here.
Oh, okay.
And they just happened to need a drummer at the time. Their drummer was leaving. I jumped in. It got me into this scene. And then I just through that started going on the road again. Different acts. And then I had really wanted my voice to be heard. I really had wanted to create something of my own.
Because that's a real thing when you're stuck behind that fucking drum kit, right? I mean, don't tell. I can never remember his name, but from my son, or from Five Alarm Funk.
Oh, Teo.
Don't tell Teo that being stuck behind the drum kit is a thing. But it's a real thing, right?
Yeah, and it's tough. And I think, you know, anyone who is in any kind of band, after a while, you start to realize, like, is this the band that the Irish have a saying, the hill you're going to die on? Is this the hill you're going to die on? Right. And so for us, I really I had started to hear this like New Orleans-y brass music, and I was like, this is the thing, which is funny. This this tall white Irish kid, that this was the music I identified with, but I really delved into it. And then I realized that, I was never going to have a very traditional New Orleans sounding band. I don't have that in my lineage.
Right.
But I loved funk music. I loved these things. And so I started, myself and another fella started putting Hurricane together. And again, it wasn't supposed to really do anything. It was supposed to appease me because I was going out playing drums for all these other acts.
Right.
And, it's like, that was great. It was a good job. And I liked it. And I liked playing other people's music, but I wanted to satiate myself. And then Hurricane kept kind of doing a little bit better. And, and
how did it start? Because it didn't start as big as it is, did it?
As many members?
Yeah.
It actually was the other way. It started with more members, but we weren't able to see at the beginning. I thought that we always needed those members. We needed every single person to do it.
I remember, and I'm only bringing this up because I wonder if there was any of this connected to, because we're about the same age.
Right.
In the 90s, there was like this very short resurgence of like big band stuff.
Yeah, I remember that.
Was that what you were sort of thinking about while you were putting this together? I mean, a different genre, but...
I don't know what I was thinking. I think I just made this list of, wouldn't it be great if we could have baritone sax and a tenor sax, and like, if you're gonna have a trombone, you should really have two, because those harmonies are where it's at, and then the trumpet, and then I made the calls, and these guys were like, this sounds interesting, we'll give it a shot. And then we started just to, as things started progressing, I would realize that, okay, I can't really have everyone for all these shows. The first few years, we would do like 3 shows a year.
Right.
Whereas like now, we do a month on the road and we're cranking through 27 shows.
Right.
I'm of the belief that if we're on the road,
you better be working.
Let's work. And I know there's days you need a break, but I'm just like, we're out, and I'm taking you away from your families, and I'm taking you away from your lives. Like, it's... let's work. And it's really nice because we have this kind of revolving door, and what I mean by that is we have kind of like a first and second and third call thing, and it's not about ability at all. What it's about is who has the time, who has the drive, who's the communicating that they really want to do it. Some people have great jobs, and there's only 2 people with kids in the band, and myself and Jacob. So I feel
you and almost the 2 that can't be replaced.
No, absolutely. And so the rule that Jacob and I kind of came up with is it's got to be worthwhile.
Right.
It really has to be worthwhile, and that means, unfortunately, saying no to sometimes what might be a cool opportunity, because we got to pay these guys.
Right.
And even myself owning our label. If you're on a normal record label, how it works is that, they pay for everything to make it come out, etc. And then you go on the road and start recouping it. Right. And you don't really get paid until after. Right. But we don't work it that way. I still pay the guys and we recoup slower, and that is the beauty of doing it our way. Right. So I don't have to be a jerk to the guys and be like, hey, guess what? March and April are not paid. Right. I don't have to say that, which is handy. Right.
It's interesting to me because, like, you come from this stuff at a perspective that's different than anybody else than we've had on the show, because you're simultaneously, by desire or otherwise, you're simultaneously the artist, the musician, but you're also the business guy. Yeah. And they're different hats.
They're different hats, and I'll tell you that I'm much more the business guy than the artist.
Really?
Much more. Much more. And I will tell you that there's oftentimes on the road, I almost forget that I have to play, because I have so much going on that, our percussionist Cooper, he can do sound check for me, he can set it all up, and I'm dealing with paperwork and booking other shows and sync licensing and all these other things, that I'm slammed. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes someone will just, like, because I wear a basketball jersey when we play, someone will just throw me my jersey and be like, it's 15 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, right, there's people to play for. And then it's that time in the show where there's the time of the day where my brain turns off. Thank God. Yeah. I need it for a few minutes. Like, even this, like, doing things like this for an hour or so. I did an interview the other day, and it was about an hour and a half long. And at the end of it, I said, how comes the terrible part where I look at my phone. Right. Because I know that people are getting back to us, and we're in the process of putting out a new record. Right. So because of that, it's just like, I'm glad that the rest of the band doesn't really know. I'm really glad that they don't really understand how much is going into it, because
I don't know what goes into it. I've got a bunch of forget your lazy band members. Talk about, and I'm being facetious. Okay. Forget your band members. There's a bunch of kids at home, hopefully, that are watching this that say, I want to do this. So what is it they got to look out for?
So imagine, like, we put together a record, like, and so the songs are written, and we have, because the studio is exceptionally expensive, because we want to go to a top-end studio. We can't do a smaller studio because it just doesn't work with the amount of people we have.
Right.
So we wanted to really top ourselves. So we went to Jacasa Studio. They did like July Talk and Alexis on Fire and all these records that we love.
Right.
And we wanted those same engineers. So we got those guys. But, so I have to schedule 25 musicians played on this record, and from Darren from the Salads, who I loved growing up, was on it, and we had a string section, we had like some choral vocals, etc. So I am basically running people through day by day, and if something goes wrong, like at the beginning is my first day, where the rhythm section is, and luckily the rhythm section banged out. Chris from Pindles, he plays with us as well, and like those guys were amazing.
Ran into almost all of them last night. They didn't even know we were in town.
I guarantee that.
By random coincidence, they shared the video that we did with them last night, and then we ran into them at Mate.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sorry. Anyway, so
no, I know. And I was gonna say, it's funny you went to Mate. You could probably just set up a camera there and catch 10 interviews with local acts.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mate here in St. Catharines, by the way. If you're in town, go down there on a Thursday night for their open jam. It's amazing.
Yeah. St. Paul, it's great. Yeah. So you get that together, and then you record it, and then you edit it, and then you mix it, and then it goes away for mastering.
Right.
So you have all those first 4 steps, but that's usually where people start to forget what happens. Usually, in my opinion, they skip a whole bunch of steps, and then they get it back, they put it online, and that's that. For us, we do the whole artwork, we get it duplicated, which means we produce CDs, we produce vinyl. All that stuff needs to go away. There has to be all sorts of art in templates. It's a big pain. And then there's publicity. We use Dynalone's in-house Listen Harder publicity, and they have like Alice in Chains and Perfect Circle. Like, they have huge acts. So we're getting them all the assets they need. Plus, anyone who books tours books them. Headliners are booked from October to January. So I'm in the fucking jungle right now of like, we've got a bunch of festivals, and a lot of them I can't even mention yet because they're not out. Plus there's a series of meetings. Plus for my agent work, I go to like Folk Alliance and Breakout West and things like that, where I am going and pitching my other artists and just meeting fests and meeting people on behalf of Hurricane and just talking about what we do and talking about what they do.
It excites me so much well, first of all, it excites me just watching you on Facebook, like just the stuff that comes up, the posts that come up, and the things that you're doing. Because like one of the things that we talk about here on the show so often is like, these guys, I know these guys, anybody watching knows these guys. You go to Mate, you go to Fog, you go to any of these places that have open jams, and you meet a bunch of wonderful human beings that all have great stories, really artistic and interesting things to say, things to do, all that stuff. Different levels of musicians, which is always beautiful. Love seeing new people sort of like find each other in places like that. But at the end of the day, you sit back and you look, and 99.9% of the people that are in and out of the room are going to go home and go back to their day job, and music is a thing that they do to relieve the stress of everyday life.
Right.
When you get into a room with a guy like you who has decided that all the stress of everyday life is going to be that, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it is a different thing, and some of those musicians are happy with that. And
I'm not shitting on it. I'm just saying,
I wish it had been me. We have
really?
You know what? I look at it this way. We used to have a guitar player who, he was as happy doing a Hurricane gig as he was just like playing like a covers gig and like eating a pound of wings and drinking a jug of beer. And I always used to say, like, you will die happier than me.
Right.
So I can't help it. I'm of that mindset where it's like, well, I just want to, like, eventually it all fails. Eventually, bands break up or whatever. But like, I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is, whenever you see that act and you're like, that band is so good and they're only regionally known.
Yeah.
Or they never leave town and they never give it a shot. And it hurts my feelings, which is one of the reasons I do these business and music talks and consultations, because I get it. I understand why. I believe mentorship is like a serious, serious deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe in it. And partly because it's like, it's hard. And whenever artists come to me and we talk and I say, well, I'll check back in a month and let me know when the existential crisis happens. I said, just text me. I said, because it's coming. You know, and any agent or band who doesn't feel like they want to just crawl into their kick drum and roll down the street is lying, because it's tough even for me. Like, you know, I'm in the midst of like booking madness, and I was joking earlier that my office looks like, you know, that shed in a beautiful mind, because it's really just like trying to make sense of, you know, you get one offer, okay, well, we're headed to Winnipeg, but the next day we have an offer in Madison, Wisconsin. Can you do that? So I'm MapQuesting, and then there's times, you know, Sylvie, I always joke that Sylvie, the singer in our group, is my enabler, because I'll be like, well, we got this one offer, but it's like a 10-hour drive. It's pretty good.
Sylvie's like, we can do it.
That's what she says. She's like, we'll just do it. And then I'll laugh. I'm like, yeah, we'll just do it. We just released a tour documentary from 2 years ago when things were starting to change.
Right.
And it's great. There's a scene where we're driving home from Halifax, and you know, you basically see hour to hour us losing our marbles, because it's just like the amount of travel. And now we're flying places, you know, which is really, really nice. And
that's an unusual leap for a lot of bands. Forget a band that has 953 members.
It started last year. I remember we were flying to BC, and as the plane took off, I kind of just looked around, and I was having, you know, I had a moment.
You'd have to on that one.
I had a nice moment where I was just like, wow, this is great, you know, like,
we're on a fucking plane, it's paid for.
It's paid for. We're gonna go and pick up our vehicles and drive, you know, into the mountains and play this big festival. And it was great, and we did, and the crowd was huge, and we did really good, and we spent a couple extra days out there and relaxed, and then we came home, and then we drove back to BC and then did it again, which is basically what I'm assuming will happen again this year.
Right.
But again, everything changes.
Yeah.
You know, in some provinces we do very well and we can be expected headlining spots in some places, but some provinces we still got to fight. You still got to build the market. So I'm not going to hear back from those fests till like March.
Right.
And so there's all this, you know, it's just this dance.
Yeah.
And you always hope that you're doing it right, and every year you learn. And I do a lot of work for other groups now, and I get it. I get why they are stressed.
Right.
And
that's got to be interesting for the other groups that you work for too, because like you're not the shitty agent. I mean, maybe you're the shitty agent guy, but you're the shitty agent guy that at least knows what it's like to do the goddamn work.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of agents never been on the road.
Right.
So they, you know, they're just like, they don't care. They'll book.
When they book you back to back to back to back.
Yeah,
They don't do that. Well, okay, MapQuest, yeah, look, you have, it's 100 miles. You have 3 hours to do it. You can do it.
Or they forget that there's like time changes. Or there's things like that. Or even just, you know, going into the States is a different ball of wax. And when we, you know, we started going, and I was thinking, you know, this is, what are we, like, how is this going to go? And we played our first festival, and it was like 1,000 people going bonkers. And then we were in West Virginia, and it was great. And then we were in Washington, D.C., and it was sold out, and NPR was there. And it was like, there's all sorts of really awesome things. And now, not to say they're all like banger shows. Like there's been a couple misses, of course. But I feel like whenever we're going out to work, it's like, well, and I'll even tell the guys, because I believe that managing expectations is part of the job of management, is I think these are going to be good. Tuesday, Wednesday, let's just see what happens. And whenever you can come into, you know, a gig knowing that, whenever there's low expectation,
it doesn't hurt.
Everyone's just expecting it. It's like, well, it's our first time in Columbus.
Right.
Let's see what happens. And maybe you're, you know, doing one of those classic play for the other band and their girlfriends. Like, who knows?
Right.
But, you know, we're lucky. It's not a lot of that.
Yeah.
And we had just played one of the last shows of the season, and we had played in Delaware last year as well. And all these people from Delaware came up, and we were like, wow, that is very random.
Right.
You know? I mean, Delaware.
But I think that's a sign of the hard work more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Because like there's a lot of talented people out there. The talent doesn't draw people from Delaware. The fact that you went to Delaware and told people that you exist is what draws people to Delaware.
Yeah,
from Delaware.
And it's not really like, you know, I mean, there's just so many good acts. It's just that, and for a variety of reasons, people can't do it. And I get it, that there is, it's hard. It's really hard. And we were, I think, smart to know that we were going to have to, I try to be an unemotional band leader. And because if someone comes to me and says, I got a better gig offer or money, or I need this money, then I can say, okay, take that. Right. I don't ever want to limit their ability to play. Which is, I think, unlike, there's like a lot of 4-piece bands where it's like, you can't leave. Yeah. And because of that, there's a lot of stress. And someone has a job, or someone's low on loot, or who knows. So there's a lot of reasons why it's tough. But I always say that, I think that for me, having so many people is kind of my glory. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, if you can't, we've, got some American guys. We go down the list, and it's great. And like, sometimes the guy that we don't get to call all the time is someone we wish we could see more. Right. So on our last big tour, I remember I had it worked out. So I think like the first 5 shows we had 6 horns, and then we went down to 4, and then we went down to 3, and then a bunch flew into Alberta. Right. And then, and then we had a huge amount, and then for one show we had 3, and then I remember for like the last couple festivals we had like 7. Like everyone was available. So you never know. So I base it upon, routing, availability, money, things like that, what's the guarantees like. So it's really different. So whenever we get these, for now, we get, a show offer, and I look at it and I say, okay, great. It pays this much. That means I can bring this many people. Plus we have techs now. Right. We have lighting and front of house and all that stuff. And so yeah, it's just like it's just like a funny deal. So how did you transition from like, I'm managing my ridiculously large band to I'm managing my ridiculously large band and a bunch of other ones? I think it was organic. Like it was just, people, it became clear that Hurricane was doing very well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of large bands came at me, like
how
large
the fuck did it help us?
Yeah, like what? How?
Right.
And I understood that. And then other people were just coming and saying, like, can I buy you a coffee and run some stuff by you? So what I started doing was I started taking agent and managing courses through Coalition, through Canada's Music Incubator, which is run out of Coalition Music in Toronto. Okay. And is that a thing just about anybody can sign up for? No. It's basically, there's like a pretty heavy, like it's a vetting process. Okay. And they want to see like how much kind of loot are you bringing in, what kind of tour dates you do, what kind of opportunities you've been bringing in. And I have always felt like I knew a lot, and I went in there, my mind was blown, and I learned so much more. It was great. And by guys who are like doing it, right? And it was really, really helpful. So I was able to kind of go back to these groups and say, this is what I can offer you. This is my skill set, and I'm happy to offer you these things. And, sometimes it was like a la carte stuff. They're like, we need festival reach out, and we need help meeting publicists or whatever. And I was like, great, sure. And I think people are just like, I don't know how to book a show. How do you book a show? Or I see Hurricane play that venue, but they won't get back to me. Right. And I say, oh, well, that's because we just called them 9,000 times. Well, or we have built a relationship. Right. Yeah. And really, it's much the same way that, I'm sure you guys get a lot of messages, and there's like a filtering process. Yeah. And most festivals have like a junk email. Yeah. So I say, well, that's because that's the junk email. And it was funny. I met Natasha, who's one of the people who books Calgary Stampede in November, and the first thing I said to her was, well, we both know that email's bullshit. What's the real one? And she laughed. She's like, oh yeah, that's okay. And so it's just that art, and I get it. And some people are exceptional songwriters and musicians, but they don't feel comfortable asking for money. Right. Or they just, they're just not the kind of people who work logistics. I like it. Right. I don't even know why I like it, but I just like, like when Hurricane goes on the road, I print out it's like a phone book of the itinerary. You send me a call sheet for this. I basically have those. I have them on the walls of the venue. This is where you are tomorrow. This is who's feeding you. Yep. This is your buyout. This is this. This is when the opener's on. Be here for this time.
And it's funny. You end up giving everybody those things. They ignore them.
I know.
Because they never even fucking look at them. But at the end of the day, you're doing it for you, not for them anyway.
Yeah, and that's the game. And hopefully, there's one other guy in the band who reads them.
Right.
That's literally the one guy.
And that's the guy that in 3 months you're going to know when you're sick, you can call up and go, hey, I need you to fill out this call sheet.
Yeah, he is funny because, like, I remember sending out everyone the thing. And I think they just glance at it, maybe. And that's fine. But you're right. Whenever you make those out, you realize I haven't figured that out yet, or I haven't reached out to that person.
Yeah.
And so you do that, and that's the way. It's, I wish that I could kind of like sit down with the early version of me who, was trying to take control of these bands.
Smack him in the back of the head?
And just say, listen, no more group conversations. Delegate what you are not good at.
Yep.
And, less information is more.
It's funny. That's a really tough lesson to learn. The other one, too, and you must have learned this really early on with the band your side, is democracy in small groups is bullshit.
Yeah, and it sounds awful, but it is not awful.
Right.
And the truth is, I always listen. I will always listen, and I will always take a better idea. I think when Sylvie came into our group, she wasn't used to ever being listened to, and I was following a lot of the things she suggested because they were great ideas.
Right.
I love a great idea.
Yeah.
If you hand me a great idea, I say thanks. Much the same way if you hand me a great song, even if I don't have I didn't write it, thank you.
Right.
So, yeah, democracy is... In that situation, it can be really dumb.
Yeah.
Because
you're just wasting time with everybody's opinions on shit they don't really have an opinion about anyway.
Yeah, and if you just and you're just saying, formulate an opinion about this, and it will just slow us down.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like saying, here's the situation, in, out.
Right.
And they'll be like, in, or... can't because of this.
Can we make this adjust? If there's a thing that needs to be adjusted, they'll tell you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And in the early days, it's harder because you don't have those kind of crowds.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, well, you want to play for a whole bunch of people?
Right.
And you get paid and, your booze is free and, whatever.
Right.
Or, and then sometimes it's as simple as saying, well, we don't know how we're going to do in Columbus, but we think this festival will be good. Or, and some people just want to... I say, well, yeah, I like to take us out of the way. I'm like, let's go to Coney Island. Let's do this. Let's have a little band outing. Yeah, and a lot of guys are really into the game. They're into, they care.
Right.
So that's good. But yeah, I think that I've been in too many of those bands where it's like, it's 25% each. We're gonna, and I'm like,
I had, and this is, we talked to them right at the time about it. I had a band that came in there. I was doing this other project where I was working with a bunch of bands, and I had this group of kids, like they were sub 20 years old for sure. And they came in. Their mom came with them. All right, so they came in, and the one band member came in late, and he goes, "Hey guys, here's your cuts from last night's gig." And I looked at him, and I went, it was like $23. And I looked at him and I went, "You guys are splitting $23? And he went, "Well, yeah." I'm like, "Quit it. Put that money into an account. That's your band fund. You don't need $25 right now. Mom's feeding you. Build your career." Like it's even little things like that.
Well, I mean, I hear it all. And, and again, I get that, when you're young, you just don't know. And a lot of bands come to me and say, "We want to go on a cross-Canada tour." And I said, well, it depends. How much do you hate money?
Right.
If you hate money, go. Because it's just like, and we made the mistake in the early days of Hurricane where we would go on these longer tours and it was like, well, you still got to play like Sunday to Thursday. And there's less loot. And especially when you don't have a lot of history.
Right.
It's tough stuff. So that's why I feel like mentorship is important.
Right.
And I say, this is how I might look at this. And I don't want to change your music. And that's one thing I would say. It's like, if they send me their tunes, I'm like, listen, you don't have to send me your songs.
Right.
What I think of them is a 36-year-old guy is not... important.
That's a weird concept to get into your head that it's like, no, at some point the music doesn't matter when it comes to this side of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course,
And the music matters, but it doesn't matter here. Actually, I think George and I just had this argument yesterday where it was like, yeah, I know what you mean. It really matters and it's super important, except not right now, so shut up.
Yes. It's the most important thing, but not now.
Right. Yeah.
And so whenever they're booking something, I'm like, send me one song link, the best song link that I can send to them, not what pleases you, what's going to please someone who is at the same time as they're booking your band is probably ordering more beer.
Right.
They have limited amount of time.
Yeah.
Just like make it easy. Yeah. And I get it. Like at the beginning, I'm like, you don't have a lot of assets. You don't have a lot to work with, but we're just going to do our best here. And
what was your first like breakthrough when it came to this stuff? Like what was the thing that stood up that you went, oh fuck, nah, like it just like opened it up for you?
Oh, I think. Oh geez,
give me a couple.
I'm in constant epiphany mode, but I think. When I realized that, it can be simple. Like, simple's okay, musically, that was the big thing. It was like, let's keep it simple. Like, I like a pop song. Right. I remember realizing that, like, I like a pop song.
Yeah.
Okay.
People forget that pop is short for popular.
Yeah. and I like it. I was like, I like this. And, like, this can still have horns, it still have substance, but still be simple enough that I like it. That was good. When I realized that, you don't need this giant crew all the time. You don't need to make it stressful.
Right.
That was my big thing was, like, I don't want it to be stressful anymore. And now that one thing isn't stressful. It's just everything else, be careful what you wish for because, is success.
You just might get it.
Success is awesome. But I also look at it this way, like when we are about to put out a record, like we'll be so far in the hole to begin it, which is fine.
Right.
Because the money will come back in. But, I remember when I always say that a few things happened that changed the band, which are, we had a big changeover in personnel. And the older personnel were great, but Sylvie came in with this new crew and we got a bunch of like younger guys who were like, had less stuff on their plate.
And had the ambition
to do it. Awesome. Number 2, I quit drinking. So one of the things that was really big for me was, I was like a strong alcoholic for a long time. And I had a kid and that changed some shit, which is great. And so whenever going out on the road wasn't about partying anymore, it was about getting it together, like make this a thing. And then I also realized that before Vegas Funeral, before my label existed, I remember just thinking like, we need a publicist, we need these things. Who's going to fund it? Do I really want? And we were talking to record labels, and I decided I don't want a record label. I don't want. Wait a second. It's just like I am purposely signing away control, and I don't know when my record could come out.
And at the end of the day, you're paying for it all anyway.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I was realizing when I realized that basically a label was a bank loan with industry clout, and I was like, you know what?
It was a membership. All a label is a membership card.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like the bigger ones have serious clout, but it's not. It's a bit of the wild, wild west now, which I love because
even they don't know what they're fucking doing right now.
Well, in the same way that some kid on like who made a song in his basement can get like 12 million streams, right. I think it's amazing because there's obviously a lot of people have a lot of talk about Spotify and things like that, and I say, well, yeah, I agree that what we make off streaming revenue is too low, but
that's not how the industry
in
works
the
anymore.
Old days, if you had told any of those labels you could be in anyone's pocket at any time, how many millions would have been worth? Everything.
Right.
It would have been worth everything. And now it's just like, if I make a new friend in Slovenia this afternoon, they can listen to my son, the Hurricane, at the same time. That to me is amazing.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. And so, if anything, it's leveled the field.
As a guy who literally sees all, well, maybe not all the pieces, but
a few.
Right?
Yeah.
From various different angles. New musicians getting started today, and they say, fuck it, I'm going to make a career out of this. What's the one piece or the best piece of advice that you can give them, mentor them to take a step? And I swear to God, if you say, call me, I'm not putting this out.
No, I would say to, invest in yourself, and make a financial investment in yourself. And that's going to mean, you're recording, and I'm not saying you have to record an album or anything, and if you don't know how to do something, attempt to learn or try to hire the people that you can. If you don't have that money, try to learn those skill sets myself. There was a time when I could never have hired a publicist, and it took a while. And don't be so rigid with your dreams. Goals are moving targets. And the things that I thought were the most important things about My Son the Hurricane, I later realized that I was actually much more bendable on them because, I told myself for years we would never have a singer. I don't want a singer in the band. And then when a singer came, I realized that it was the grease for this wheel that we always needed.
Right.
And then it was, it was just me being pig-headed, which Sylvia will tell you I am all the time anyways. But invest in yourself and try to learn. Like, the business is like your guitar. Like, you need to practice that. You need to work at it. There's something about sending your first email to a festival that's not easy. People get analysis paralysis all the time. I deal with this all the time, and understand that it's okay to get depressed about what you're doing because it's tough and people aren't going to really give you the time. This is a long game.
Well, they tell you coming up through any entertainment that you're setting yourself up to be rejected constantly, and that's true. But what they don't tell you is that the first person who will tell you the most often that you aren't worth a shit is yourself.
Absolutely. And, I always use the analogy, ask the girl to dance. And even if she says no, that's fine, then
Right.
But for me, if I never asked her to dance, I would beat myself up.
Right.
If a festival tells us we're not, I just don't think this is the right fit, well, then I know. I know where I stand, and it doesn't hurt me anymore. Like, I need to get that out. So I always say, take the plunge. It's the worst thing they're going to say is, this is shit. You should never do this.
Well, and the biggest difference when it comes to business and stuff, what I've learned in this, that the difference between it and asking the girl to dance is that you're actually better off in this business to keep asking when they say no. Where asking the girl to dance after she said no a couple of times just becomes shitty.
Yeah. Well, I think you just really need to figure out what's important to you, and maybe and the goals change. At first, that goal is going to be something as simple as recording 2 songs.
Right.
That's great. And maybe, when it comes to asking her to dance, what that means is, getting your career to a different spot to where you come back and you're in a different position and asking again and saying, does this seem like a good fit to you now? And that's it.
It's funny because something you just said sort of like pinned me down on this other idea that I'd been playing around with for a while, and that's the idea of stopping, not thinking of goals as final points.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even when you achieve a goal, you're never done. Like, there's a comedian that said, like, when you buy your first couch, you look at that couch and go, all right, now I've got that couch thing settled. I don't have to think about getting a couch anymore. But then 5 years later, you turn around and go, fuck, I need a couch. Like, it changes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. And when you put a big piece of the puzzle in, it feels great, but it's always
you're not done.
Yeah, and it's never done.
Yeah.
And
until it's done, in which case you're moving on to something else.
Yeah. Who knows? It's like be willing to learn. I was so pig-headed as a kid, and I think of it now. It's like now all I want to do is listen.
Yeah.
Whenever I go to a conference, before I do the big ask for Hurricane, I'm just like, what do you guys do? Tell me about what you do. And it's, sure, I would like to get us in there, but a lot of times I realize the best thing to do is just learn. Like, people out there have, amazing amounts of insight. People you don't even know. People who, like, oh, that guy was in a band for 10 years? What does he know? And, it's the jaded musicians that I would, like, watch out for, because they're the guys who will tell you, don't do this, it's shit, whatever. Well, no, if you like it, it's not shit.
Right.
It's just, maybe you're going to have to work harder for it.
Also, watch out for the ones that tell you that everything needs to be like it used to be.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's, if you really want to hurt yourself, just keep reading YouTube comments. But I mean, that's
What's your favorite YouTube comment that you've ever gotten?
You know what? It would be impossible for me to tell you, but I can say this. We did a cover years ago of For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Okay.
And it got like 70,000 views. Like, it did really, really well on YouTube. And, you know, Jacob, our rapper, is in fact a rapper.
Right.
And, you know, we're like, let's do this. And he's like, okay, I love Metallica. Let's give it a try. But for us, it's fine. You just play a pitched instrument and it sounds like it. But, you know, like, if you don't sound like James Hetfield, you don't sound like James Hetfield.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like a massacre on there. But the great part is
it still up?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and we'll find it. We'll put links.
Yeah, totally.
Links right there.
We actually made a video called Mr. Bergsma versus YouTube.
Okay.
And it's us reading them out. And they are hilarious. And that's what I'll say Jacob's credit is, you know, he's a mid-30s guy rapping. He's got a home and a wife and a kid, and you know, he's just like, he understands what it is. He's like, yeah, like, not everyone's gonna get it, that's fine. And now that people have like it's funny, you know, when things start going well, you know, the vultures start circling. They say, well, we always said this would be a success.
Really? Because I remember you in the fucking bathroom stall when he didn't know I was here.
Which is the same reason why we keep coming back to venues which in sometimes our crowds have outgrown.
Right.
Because that owner was there.
Right.
And it's like, well, to me, that loyalty means something. And it's like, and I always try to say to them, I think it's getting to that time where we need to go to a bigger room. What can we do? You know, maybe we could work on something together.
And then you end up playing a theater.
Which you end up playing a theater. Whereas, like, you know, for us to play the Dominion House in Windsor, well, that's a small room for us. We actually played a grade school in Windsor. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. It was a teacher that I'm friends with. I apologize.
James Smith.
That's right. Because he had reached out and said that you guys were coming on. That's right.
Yeah. And Corpus Christi.
Yes.
And it was, you know,
my daughter's school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she wasn't there at the time, but
yeah, really, really fun us doing these school shows now, because again, it's just like, you know, I keep talking about the guys and mentorship.
Yeah.
I said, you know, people are going to see you doing this and seeing what you've done on your instrument, and it's up to you how you want to go with that. But you're never going to, you know, what people do with the information you give them is not your business.
Yeah.
But you have that ability, and we all know good mentors, and that's an amazing thing. And I love doing the school ones, and I especially love it because Sylvie connects with, you know, I have a young daughter, so I am really, and I have so many sisters that I remember that like middle school and high school was really tough for them, and they're really trying to figure out who the hell they are. Mm-hmm. And that's so important to see, like, a strong female role model who does not give a shit.
Yeah.
She is unabashedly her.
Yep.
And love her or hate her, she's her. And
I don't know how anyone could hate Sylvie.
And, you know, but I think, you know, at first, you know, they see her dancing. She's kind of wild.
Very much, because she's out there. She doesn't give a shit if you like it or not.
And, and that is such, to me, it's just such a compliment. And I think to see, you know, this woman out there, she doesn't give a shit, and this big group of dudes behind her being the support. Yeah. You know, and I think it's really amazing, and I hope that there are women like that for, you know, my little girl to look up to. And so I think it's great. And it's amazing. I look at like July Talk, and you know how you have this really crazy juxtaposition between this sweet vocal style and this guy who sounds like he's from hell. Right. You know, it's amazing. Yeah. I think, like, wow, that's a great thing that sort of stuff is existing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, Danno, we are at the end of our hour for sure. Tell the folks at home how they can get a hold of you guys, where they can see My Son the Hurricane, all of that stuff.
Right, so My Son the Hurricane will be on a North American tour as of March 1st. You can find us on all those socials, and msthofficial.com. And also Vegas Funeral Records is my little label. And we don't have the traditional infrastructure that a label would have. We don't need all that sort of stuff because it basically exists for my booking purposes. But if you hear that name, this is who's attached.
And of course, like always, like always, we will put our all of the links to all of that stuff and all of our sponsors and ourselves down below. You can check all of that out. There'll be some videos popping up next to us that you can check out. One of them for sure is going to be the performance video that we did with My Son the Hurricane.
Oh, I love that one.
You definitely want to check that
That's
one
a
out.
good one.
Go see these guys on the road. They are one of the most incredible bands that this country has to offer you right now. Definitely want to go see them. And Dan just happens to be a fantastic dude too.
Oh,
thanks for hanging out with us, man.
Thanks, man.
It was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
See you next time.